year ago, I released a video titled "I Didn't Like the Batman at All." Given the wall-to-wall praise the movie was getting at the time from seemingly all corners of the internet, that went about as well as you'd expect. I made my review because I felt like I was the only person seeing or talking about the issues I had with the movie. I did get the odd "I'm so glad to finally find a review I agree with" comment here and there, and interestingly, those became much more frequent after the movie went to streaming, but for the most part I felt like I was living in a different reality than everyone else discussing the film. It was a little unsettling. I really did want to understand what people saw in it though, so I watched it 2 more times in the months following that video, and both of those times I actually enjoyed it. Not as much as everyone else, but well enough. A lot more than the first time. The problems I had with it were still there, but they seemed much less significant, a smaller portion of the overall experience when considered alongside other aspects of the movie that I was starting to appreciate. So, I decided my first review wasn't gonna cut it. I'll admit that I didn't sufficiently explain some of my criticisms. I kind of get why a bunch of people in the comments were actually angry, and anyway, I didn't even have all the same complaints anymore. It was time for an updated review. Except it wasn't. It was time to talk about Mystic River, and then The Silence of the Lambs, and then Minority Report, and somewhere in there I got married, went on my honeymoon, quit my job, moved to Seoul, flew across the world, spent a month in the US, attended a friend's wedding, started a new job. I'm slow about uploading. Not a lot I can do about that for now, unfortunately. But at last, more than half a year after announcing this video, here it is, and only about a month late for the 1-year anniversary of the first review.
It's been a long time coming, huh?
Writing this was a roller coaster for me, and whether you love this movie or hate it, this video will probably be a roller coaster for you. So strap in and let's do this. Aside from basic insults and totally level-headed, well-considered accusations of being an angry Zack Snyder fan, a fair amount of the criticism I got on that first video boiled down to "you can tell this guy doesn't read comics," which was true. I'd never read a single Batman comic before watching The Batman. My experience with Gotham City and its inhabitants was limited to the animated series, some movies, and the occasional Scooby-Doo crossover.
And turnabout is fair play, not foul.
Very good, Jolly Jester. Now that we've turned away the intrepid intruders, let's flee to our flighty friend, Professor
And I never thought that was an issue. A work of art should stand on its own. People shouldn't have to engage with external material to enjoy something. Nevertheless, I did my homework for this video. I bought and read through several popular, influential Batman comics, including Batman Year One, The Long Halloween and its sequel Dark Victory, Hush, The Court of Owls saga, and The Killing Joke. I didn't need to do that, but I don't mind putting in that little bit extra for people who think it matters. I enjoyed a lot of what I read, so it's win-win, and I figured some familiarity with the foundations of Batman as it's known today would enrich my perspective and give me more to offer you in this updated review. And I was curious. Comic accurate is one point of praise for this movie I've heard again and again, and I wanted to see for myself. So, newly acquainted with the comics detective version of Batman, the Batman I now realize has been absent from the silver screen for decades, I watched The Batman again. I don't have a lot of free time these days, and it was around 11 p.m. when I finally got a chance to start this nearly 3-hour movie. I told myself I'd watch maybe half and save the rest for the following evening after work. I definitely didn't want to be going to bed at 2 in the morning. Guess what time I ended up getting to bed? Yeah, you guessed it. Good job.
World's greatest detectives!
Several false promises of "I'll just watch through to the end of this section later," I knew I was fooling myself. I stopped making promises and just watched, more engrossed in the story this time around than ever before. Now, the biggest reason for this is probably that I knew I had this video to make, and so I was mentally cataloging the ideas, looking for themes. But forcing myself to engage more actively with the film obviously enhanced the experience, as is the case with any work. For one thing, I noticed more than ever before how gorgeous this movie looks. It might be the best looking live-action Batman movie on a technical level. Greg Fraser, who was also the cinematographer for films like Rogue One and Denis Villeneuve's Dune, brings Gotham City to life in vivid, colorful detail. I've seen a whole lot of people say the movie's too dark. If they mean aesthetically, I can sort of get behind that. I think the dark look works for this movie, but rewatching 2005's Batman Begins just a day or two after rewatching this, I was really struck by how far a little warmth in the color palette went towards humanizing the characters and situations and giving the movie as a whole some more heart. The visual language of film can often do a lot of the heavy lifting in that regard. Nolan's Batman trilogy achieves a balance here that better suits my personal tastes, but of course different works have different stylistic goals. Some of the individual shots in The Batman are better than anything I've seen in any other Batman film. Aesthetics aside, I have seen people say that the movie was literally too dark, as in they couldn't see what was happening. Enough people have brought it up that it's possible the movie really is too dark for some theater setups, but I personally didn't have that problem. As far as I'm concerned, it looks fantastic. A major issue I had with the movie before was its tone, and on that front, reading the comics has made a world of difference. I get it now. If you like those, I understand why you like this. It captures the mood and spirit of the comics, at least the ones I read, like no live-action Batman film has before, and it's not even a competition. From the moment the title simply appears on screen before the first actual scene, watching the Batman feels like reading a comic book. It's got that bad comic book dialogue, fine in an actual comic book, but so unnatural coming out of real people's mouths. I didn't know any better before I mistook it for bad dialogue that someone thought was realistic, when it's almost certainly the way it is on purpose.
I got you! I got you! Take that, you friggin' psycho! I got you!
The intentional hamminess to fit with the film noir aesthetic went over my head the first time I watched, but understanding that that is what they're going for alleviates a lot of my problems with this movie. Colin Farrell's Penguin, for instance, goes from embarrassingly goofy if you're watching this movie expecting Nolan,
I didn't kill no girl!
to fantastic as this mobster caricature.
It's okay, baby.
Zoe Kravitz's performance gets a boost from this too, though I already thought she was good aside from the quality of the lines she had to deliver. In fact, her more grounded, well-balanced style and attitude make Kravitz easily the best Catwoman I've seen. I know people love Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns, and she did a good job, but the job she did wasn't a job I personally wanted done. Jeffrey Wright's mile-a-minute gruff cop talk works a lot better when you know it's part of the overall package too.
But they needed a minor league mope like you to run it.
So it might be fair to say that a lot of my initial distaste for this movie was due to my own failure to recognize the style it was going for. I think most people who liked it did pick up on it and just rolled with it, and more power to you guys. Me personally, I'm usually not in the mood for heavily stylized stuff that smears it on quite this thick, but I can appreciate it and enjoy it here and there. But the film noir style doesn't account for every creative choice, and there are a few things I just can't get behind no matter how many times I see them.
Holy God, what are you showing me? Come on!
I'm gonna alienate a lot of people by saying this, but I think Paul Dano's performance becomes catastrophically terrible the moment he starts wailing in the Arkham Asylum scene. But let's back up, because he's great until then. It's extremely eerie watching him psych himself up before killing Mayor Don Mitchell Jr., and then shocking when he goes for it. He's fantastically entertaining as the pathetic type who's finally gained a bit of leverage when he torments Gil Coulson, savoring the power and milking the moment for all it's worth.
Don't lose your head, Mr. Coulson. Just one more to go before your time runs out. Last riddle.
His other videos to the public are likewise wonderfully jubilant as he revels in exposing Gotham's lies, and he absolutely nails the persona of a lonely internet dweller pandering to his followers, a guy who still isn't used to his newly attained level of influence. And I love his expressions. Not so much this one, where it looks like someone's doing him a nice favor under the counter, but this little smile when he sees Batman outside is perfect. Not sinister or threatening, but mischievous and even good-natured, like they're both thinking the same thing, sharing an inside joke. And then this smile when he first lays eyes on Batman from his room in Arkham, his face and eyes pinching up like a giddy fan meeting his favorite voice actor at a convention. Ugh, it makes my skin crawl. Just that feeling you get when someone really off-putting likes you a whole lot more than you like them and expects something from you, just assumes you're on board. It's an awkward position to be put in, and this is an awkward moment to watch in the best way. Here's where he starts to lose me.
Bruce Wayne.
This is stupid. No one does this. But okay. Dano pulls me back in with some great acting while delivering his rant about being an orphan. Some people lack that bit of self-awareness that helps them pick up on nonverbal cues and clues them into the fact that you might not want to sit and listen to them tell you at length how the world is according to them. Dano channels that really well here. His reaction to Batman asking him why he wrote to him is perfect too. The brief pause, blink, and then his tone is still friendly when he asks,
What do you mean?
It's good stuff, subtle and believable. It's the wailing. The wailing ruins it, and from that instant on, whatever magic there was is dead. Going big and loud in front of a camera doesn't equate to good acting. I understand there are times when good acting calls for big and loud, and this scene might have been a case like that, but Dano did not pull it off as far as I'm concerned. It was like a switch was flipped and all the care and consideration he'd been putting into the role up to this point went out the window.
No! We were gonna be safe here!
It's pretty good, like he feels personally betrayed by Batman not being who he imagined he was, but
We could watch the whole thing together!
sounds really unnatural, like a trial and error take that just came out that way from an actor playing around with how someone might actually say that line. It doesn't help how clunky and first draft the writing is here.
Oh, you're really not as smart as I thought you were.
And then, like so many other moments in this drawn-out movie, we have to sit and wait the length of another scary face, another breath drawn and exhaled, for a completely underwhelming follow-up line.
I guess I gave you too much credit.
Yeah, those mean the same thing. Those two back-to-back sentences mean the same thing in this context. The second line doesn't add to our understanding of what the Riddler is thinking or feeling here. If you wanted to be really generous, you could say the realization that he was wrong about Batman is still dawning on him, and so he's repeating himself out of shock because he just can't believe it, but that seems pretty flimsy. The movie's campy film noir aesthetic isn't an excuse this time. It's bland, black text on white paper dialogue that was written down and then left unchanged. It doesn't feel alive, and Dano making a pufferfish face doesn't do much to fix that. A lot of people liked this scene and called it brilliant acting, and it's fine if they enjoyed it, but I didn't, and I disagree, and I'm not holding back or sugarcoating this. The Riddler's tantrum here feels immersion-breakingly acted and artificial, some writer's idea of what crazy looks like, or Dano's, and what I guess was his honest attempt at it.
You guys have officially made me lose my marbles! This is a nightmare!
The dialogue is hollow, the singing of Ave Maria comes across as laughably try-hard, and the swell of suspenseful music accompanying all of this makes the whole thing feel like a farce. It's trying for that awful realization moment seen in better movies like Seven, where it becomes clear to both the protagonist and the audience that something terrible has happened, that some devilish trick has been pulled, but to me it felt unearned and fell completely flat. Even worse is the Joker scene. Not the deleted scene, but the tease that was actually in the final cut of the movie. That was flat out embarrassing, and the less said about it, the better. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and wanted to melt into my chair.
Who are you? Well, that's the question. Isn't it?
Good lord, someone really wrote the hell out of this dialogue, didn't they? And then they left it that way. Was it secretly you, M. Night?
I thought it was overwritten, and it is overwritten.
Was it you, Nomura?
A heart can live anywhere, even inside data. There are hearts all around us.
Who did this? Who did this?
Who are you? Well, that's the question. Isn't it?
Yes. Anyway, one last note about pushing tone to absurd levels in regards to the Riddler, though this one isn't about Dano pretending to freak out. The end of the diner scene. I'm actually perfectly satisfied with how I already said it in my last video, so I'm just gonna play that part. Two candidates for worst scene in the entire movie. One is the trailer scene where they catch the Riddler at the diner. In the trailer, it makes sense to slowly pan up to his coffee so we can see the question mark in his latte art and realize that's who the villain of the movie is because it's a trailer. 2.5 hours into the movie, that scene does not make sense. We've already seen question marks all throughout the movie. They've been talking about Riddler, Riddler, Riddler. We know who the villain is. They've already captured him. Why did the camera slowly pan up with a dramatic musical sting to let us know that there's a question mark in his latte foam 2.5 hours into the movie? Couldn't have said it better myself. Me. When that scene played in the theater, I turned to my friend Bobby and pretended to gasp in shock, and he laughed. Seriously, it's such a ridiculous little indulgence. It caps off an otherwise decent scene with unintentional humor. I don't think even the Court of Owls comic stooped this low. So what, when this Riddler takes a dump and then stands up, is there a question mark shape in the toilet before he flushes? With the dramatic music sting? This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen, pun not intended. Or maybe it was. Figure it out. It's a riddle!
My life has been a cruel riddle I could not solve.
Alright people, deep breath. The worst is over. We're getting to the good stuff, I promise. Jim Gordon is pretty actively involved in the story, which is good, and Jeffrey Wright gives a mostly solid performance. He unfortunately gets more than his fair share of on-the-nose dialogue that feels extremely written, but that isn't the actor's fault, and I've already explained why I think most of that's intentional anyway. He does the best he can with it, and he pulls it off well enough more often than not. I think his growling here was a poor choice.
Rat with wings, a stool pigeon, that's not you. The symbol's in the maze right here. It says, you are El Rata Alada.
It just sounds ridiculous, like he's recording voice lines for the English dub of some anime or video game. But there are also moments like this one in which he sounds realistic and down to earth.
You mean like you trust me? It's been 2 years now, and I don't even know who you are, man.
Overall, I think I might like Gordon in this movie close to as much as I like Gordon in Nolan's films. I'm surprised to be saying that, because he's one of my favorite characters in those movies. I like them much more than this one, and Gary Oldman is easily the better actor in my opinion. But the Batman's Jim Gordon has this assertive go-getter quality that Nolan's lacked. And while I personally like Oldman's portrayal more, I think Wright's might be closer to Gordon from the comics. But both performances have their own unique appeal. Speaking of unique, and this is the shittiest segue ever, actor Con O'Neill has one of the most unique voices I think I've ever heard.
In an active hostage situation, Coulson's blood is on his hands.
In my original review, I made fun of his performance as Gotham City Chief of Police Mackenzie Bach, not to be confused with William Kenzie, another mustached cop who antagonizes Batman. Why did they do that? I thought he was putting the voice on, but no, that's just what he sounds like.
Hello, I'm Con O'Neill.
He really does sound like a howling wolf when he talks.
What the hell is he doing? Gordon! You have any idea what kind of trouble you're in? You could be an accessory to murder.
I didn't realize.
You son of a bitch.
My mistake, and I apologize to the guy. I think it's actually a pretty cool voice now that I know he's not faking it, and my friends tell me he's a good actor and other stuff. When I looked him up before writing this part of the script, I learned that he voiced Titchy Gran in Dark Souls 2 and Moog Lord of Blood in Elden Ring. I'm a huge fan of From Software's games, so that was a really pleasant surprise.
You've done well to find me. Do you seek blood? Yes, of course. Why else would you be here? You must abide alone a while. Welcome, honored guest, to the birthplace of our dynasty.
Rock on, Mr. O'Neill, and praise the sun. Getting back on track, Andy Serkis is the best actor in The Batman. I'm not saying he gave the best performance in the movie because I don't think he did. I'm saying that if you look at all the actors in this movie and consider their roles in it and other stuff they've done, Serkis comes out on top. And he's pretty damn close to the top here too. Now I've seen people say he was totally wrong as Alfred, that he was too young, and I couldn't disagree more. He's almost 60, which means when the Waynes were murdered and he was left to raise Bruce by himself, he'd have been, what, late 30s? I'll buy that. I don't have a problem with the age gap there. He says in the movie that he taught Bruce how to fight, so really him being a little younger makes sense here. Robert Pattinson is maybe the third best actor in The Batman. He's given some truly excellent performances over the last 5 or 6 years. Once again, not the best here, but he's pretty good. As Batman. I'm a lot more mixed on his Bruce Wayne, as anyone who was around for that first video might remember. I like him at times, but find him frustratingly one note. I get it. Batman is his true persona in this movie, his obsession. Riddler spells it out, I get it, everyone gets it. And I'm not asking for charming playboy billionaire Bruce. That wouldn't fit in this story. What I do want is a slightly broader range of emotions and facial expressions. We've got serious and stoic and focused, and we've got mildly irritated, and we've got sad, and oh, here's shocked. Shocked and shaken to his core. Well, that's certainly something. But let's take a look at this scene between Bruce and Alfred. This scene gives me this odd phantom pain sort of feeling, a fleeting tingle, just this faint breath of emotion from a really profound and moving moment that isn't actually there but which is clearly supposed to be. I'm not trying to be difficult to please. My heart's open. I want to be touched.
I wanna be touched. Oh.
I want to be moved to tears. I like when stories do that, and I want it to happen here. But the catharsis here isn't very cathartic. The scene feels like the grand culmination of not much. For one thing, the subplot about Thomas Wayne's alleged shadiness isn't given room to breathe. It's on rails from the moment Bruce sees the Riddler's exposé. Cut to him going to get an earful of exposition from Carmine Falcone, cut to him then moodily entering his parents' room in Wayne Manor, and finally cut to him confronting Alfred, who immediately sets the record straight. The entire idea of Bruce doubting his father's character plays out entirely over almost precisely 10 minutes. I timed it. and then it's over and done with, just like that. It could have been something he dealt with for a substantial stretch of the movie, and it would have been interesting to watch him navigate more of the story's situations and grapple with its developments a lot less sure-footed, questioning the very foundation of his motivations. Instead, the idea just came and went, manufactured drama we watched shudder past on a conveyor belt. That's half of why this scene didn't feel earned. Aside from closure about Bruce's father, the scene's other main objective was the resolution to Bruce's and Alfred's strained relationship, and by extension Bruce finally letting his guard down and admitting his fears, acknowledging that he needs other people. At this, the film was a little more successful, but only a little. Scattered throughout the early parts of the movie are a few scenes of Alfred trying to get Bruce to care about his family's legacy and Bruce icing him out, and in these Serkis does a really good job, but I'm so mixed on Pattinson's Bruce Wayne. Again, specifically his Bruce Wayne. His Batman is solid, and there are moments with his Bruce that I love, like here when he gives the press the faintest ghost of a false smile. Literally blink and you'll miss it, it's gone so fast, leaving the impression that Bruce knows he's supposed to be keeping up appearances to some degree when in public, but that he's so damaged, so troubled, that pitiful bare minimum effort was all he was able to manage in his frame of mind. It might be my favorite shot of Bruce in the entire movie. There's also this moment when he needs to wear sunglasses indoors because he's not used to being up and active while it's light out. He really sells that. The problem is this look he gets, this fixed wooden scowl plastered unnaturally across his face. It's subtle, but you can see it in the set of his jaw and the way he pushes his lips together, and once you see it, it's hard to unsee. It's not how Robert Pattinson normally looks, he's putting it on. It seems to be the style he came up with for playing Bruce, and while you could argue, sensibly, that it's intentional because in this movie Bruce is the mask and Batman is his true self, it just looks bad. It looks like acting. I know Pattinson can do better than that. Here, for example, he's got a little more life in his face. His eyes are wider as he's looking around, and his lips are slightly parted in surprise when this guy talks to him. That's all fine, but then sometimes he gets this expression and it just looks to me like the actor Robert Pattinson is trying so hard to convey pain and distance. Whatever the reason for it, he should drop it partway through his big talk with Alfred and then keep it off for the rest of that scene at least. Instead, he kicks it up a notch. I think what we're looking at here is meant to be him fighting to keep his emotions under control, but it just looks like his wisdom teeth are hurting him. Call this a nitpick if you want, and if it wasn't a problem for you, I'm not trying to make it a problem, but every time I watch the movie this leaps off the screen at me, and small details matter. They can make the difference between investment and immersion, and totally not buying it. If you want to see a movie where all of these little subtleties are perfect and believable, watch Prisoners. I can't think of a single look or utterance that wasn't spot on. And subtle details aside, it's just a much more compelling mystery, a far less ham-fisted and more sophisticated character study, and a better film in every way. So we have what's meant to be this emotional beat here, and it just doesn't land. This one doesn't either, nor does this one. I get it.
I'm vengeance.
Bruce realizes that brutally punishing criminals has only inspired more crime and that he has to become something more, has this sort of metaphorical baptism in which he's essentially reborn as an actual hero, a beacon of hope, and then leads people to safety, as heroes do. I get it. I didn't miss the messaging, and that's sort of the problem. The writer's fingers were heavy on the scales in this story.
Please don't hurt me.
This moment with the man being afraid of Batman early on is paid off here, when this scared woman doesn't want him to leave her side, but it makes no sense for this guy to think Batman's going to hurt him. Batman has been active for 2 years, only assaults criminals, and just saved him from a violent beatdown. The whole setup feels manipulative to me. The man is shown to be afraid because the writers want us to understand that Batman is going about things the wrong way, but why is the man afraid? Why would someone in his position say what he said to a man he knows only goes after criminals, and who just put a stop to the criminals assaulting him, other than having been written that way by writers who want to get their story's message from point A to point B? You could come up with reasons for this that would make sense in real life. Maybe he wasn't thinking clearly because he was still shaken and traumatized by what almost happened to him, but that's obviously not what the film is going for, and that sort of flimsy justification is just damage control from people who don't want to think there might be significant elements of the movie with which someone might reasonably take issue. This scene is a major part of the movie's thematic mission, which culminates in the torch scene and the moment with the woman not wanting to let go, explained heavy-handedly through Bruce's comic book narration box inner monologue. I've seen so many people all over the internet saying almost verbatim that this shot gave them chills that I feel like a lot of them must have read that exact sequence of words somewhere else and liked how it sounded enough to repeat it. And I get it. It feels good to repeat something a lot of other people are saying that you agree with and want to be true. It feels good to be caught up in a rapturous, almost religious shared emotional experience induced by a work of art. It's just a little awkward for those left standing to the side of it all, skeptical and unimpressed. I'm almost a little envious that I didn't vibe with this story the way so many apparently did. I want to stress again that it's not that I didn't understand it. The idea of Batman needing to be more than vengeance was explored far more cerebrally and effectively in Batman Begins, I thought.
Theatricality and deception are powerful agents. You must become more than just a man in the mind of your opponent.
People need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy, and I can't do that as Bruce Wayne. As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be ignored, I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be incorruptible. I can be everlasting.
Whereas the Batman concerns itself more with delivering a message, executing the same themes in a slicker, more stylish form that I personally find to be comparatively watered down in substance. Speaking of the Nolan movies, another thing that felt borrowed from those in this movie was its take on the Riddler. In the first place, it was an odd departure from classic portrayals of his character to reimagine him as an Antifa loser. I know people say he's meant to be a right-wing quote-unquote incel, but those people live in a bubble, as that's so clearly not true. The awkward, greasy, amphibian-looking weirdos who constantly bitch about the rich,
All those slick, sleazy, phony pricks.
call police pigs,
I will already be unmasked. The pigs will have me in their custody.
unironically refer to their online socialist roleplay groups as communities,
What this community is meant to me.
and babble about violence being justified when fighting against murkily defined quote-unquote fascists.
All it takes is fear and a little focused violence.
Those bright, stable, well-adjusted people going around hitting others with bike locks for the high crimes of not being ashamed of who they are, of having healthy social lives and good relationships with their families, and of not thinking it's a great idea to haphazardly tear everything down. Those guys aren't typically right-wingers, and right-wingers are nowhere near as organized as the Riddler proves to be. It's a strange take on the character until you remember that seemingly everything Batman related since Nolan's films has tried to cash in on Heath Ledger's legendary Joker performance somehow, whether with the actual Joker character or another villain reimagined with similar quirks.
Your plan.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
You did this to start a movement?
Do I look like the kind of clown that could start a movement?
It's so obviously derivative. They can't keep using the Joker every time, but change the name, slap a different villain costume on him, swap out self-indulgent "my life is a joke" monologues for "my life is a riddle." God, am I sick to death of these fucking rabbit food trailer lines. And just use the Joker anyway.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy, but now I realize it's a comedy.
My life has been a cruel riddle I could not solve.
Anyone remember the time back before 2012 when we were hot off The Dark Knight and rumors were circulating about the third Nolan Batman movie, in which Philip Seymour Hoffman was rumored to be playing the Penguin and Johnny Depp was supposedly gonna play the Riddler? No? Just me, really? Well, that would not have been a great scenario. Maybe the first part would have been, but sweet mother of God, not the second part. But compared to what we got here, if nothing else, it might have been more appropriate to the spirit of the character. The Batman's Riddler's riddles are neat but simplistic, and the way Batman is forced to respond to them, either by blurting out the answer almost immediately or by fumbling around for a while until someone else figures them out for him,
It's La right there.
doesn't do much in the way of getting me to feel like I'm figuring things out with Batman, which is what I was expecting and excited for when I heard all the praise for this movie, before I watched it for myself.
Do you know what I am? He's an orphan.
The Silence of the Lambs, Zodiac, Prisoners, and arguably Seven are all better detective stories than this. The back and forth interaction between Batman and the Riddler via riddles being as limited as it is, it's up to the other dimension to their relationship, their parallel motivations, to do a lot of the heavy lifting. If the Riddler wants to wipe out the corruption in Gotham because corrupt officials are bad and have made things harder for the poor and destitute, then the last stage of his plan, assassinating the honest and idealistic Bella Real and flooding the city, killing who knows how many innocents, with the fallout and aftermath disproportionately affecting the poor, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You could argue that this is by design, that despite presenting his cause as a noble crusade, he's actually driven first and foremost by resentment, and all his self-righteous talk is just a cover for acting out the deep darkness inside him. That'd be another thing he has in common with Antifa. It'd also be something he has in common with Batman, who for 2 years has been angrily lashing out while telling himself it's for the sake of change. The Riddler does straight up tell Batman that he inspired him after all. So there we have it then? There's that question answered? Well, I'm not sure. The thing is, up until he tried to kill Bruce Wayne, and later Bella Real, the Riddler only targeted people who either did terrible things or else stood by and allowed them to happen. Carmine Falcone was a monster who murdered at least 2 women and tried to murder his own daughter among many other crimes, and arresting him was unlikely to accomplish anything long term. When he told Gordon he'd be walking free, he was almost certainly correct, or at least he would have been if the Riddler hadn't taken him out. However you may feel about what the Riddler is doing, there's a clear logic to it for most of the movie. Similarly, yes, Batman is a violent vigilante, but he's not assaulting people at random. There was no one else around to help this guy, and who knows what these thugs would have done to him if Batman hadn't stopped them. So the Riddler's plan in the third act feels suspiciously like a case of 1 or 2 of the writers in the writer's room saying something along the lines of, we need the villain to make enough sense to be compelling, but we also need him to still be bad, so let's make him actually crazy and evil. And if that's the case, that doesn't leave us with much in terms of a firm moral takeaway beyond it being bad to indiscriminately kill a bunch of innocent people. Is that it? Is that all we get? Because it's either Riddler had a point but then inexplicably betrayed everything he stood for, or Riddler's reasons were always lies and he was actually just bad, lol. And neither one of those is great. The latter at least makes sense. Batman tries to stop a bad man from doing bad things, but it hardly makes the movie a masterpiece. It's kind of a cop-out. But listen to me. I promised we were getting to the good stuff, and we barely dipped our toes in it before I found more bad just beneath the glossy surface. Is it just me, or are we uncovering a pattern here? Still, there is good stuff. On the subject of watching Batman do detective work, while I do think that aspect of the movie is extremely surface level, it is a nice surface. On repeat viewings, with my expectations tempered, I sort of enjoyed watching Batman wordlessly walk around dark rooms looking at stuff. And for what it's worth, I think this Riddler in a vacuum is a pretty fun villain. Maybe not a great Riddler. I think Hush, from whom Matt Reeves very obviously took inspiration, would have been more appropriate, but he's still enjoyable to watch, and Paul Dano does a good job in most scenes. Here's something I really like. Bruce staring at Mayor Mitchell's son both as Batman in Mitchell's home and later as himself, or at least as his public Bruce Wayne persona, at Mitchell's public memorial. The boy is, of course, a reflection of Bruce himself, of the broken child he still is on the inside, and seeing him just after his father was murdered reminds Bruce of his own past while planting in his mind the seed of the idea that there might be something worth fighting for other than vengeance. This is obvious, extremely so. What's less obvious, and what I find a lot more interesting, is how the boy responds to Bruce. He notices both instances of Bruce staring at him and stares back with an open, inquisitive expression, looking maybe a little uncertain but not threatened, more curious than anything. A stark contrast to how Batman has been looked at and treated by everyone else in this scene aside from Jim Gordon. Throughout the entire movie, Bruce has trouble with eye contact when he's not masked up as Batman, but at just this boy he looks directly, unapologetically holding his gaze, and the boy responds in kind. Each time we see him, he's looking down in despair until he notices Bruce, and then, of course, he's the first to accept Batman's outstretched hand during the rescue scene near the end, and I like to think that he might have put 2 and 2 together by this point, that he more than anyone else might realize exactly whose hand he's taking and know that it's someone who tried to save him once before, someone he can trust. That, or he at least understands on some level that Batman and Bruce Wayne are alike, that Batman is someone who wants to help. In the process of writing this, I searched online to see if anyone else had had the same idea and found a bunch of people asking if this kid is meant to be Robin. I'm gonna momentarily go off topic here to say that people have got to stop doing this and start thinking about the meaning of the art they engage with, about what's being said, what observation about the human condition is being made. The kid isn't Robin. Matt Reeves publicly confirmed this, but it was never a real question even before he did. The thought had never entered my mind, not because I wasn't clever enough to think about it, but because it's a terrible idea. Just like I never thought the Force-using boy at the end of Star Wars The Last Jedi was related to any named character or at all worth speculating about, because that too would have been a terrible idea. I won't go any further with this topic because it's not what my video is about, but if you're always looking at media in terms of what references it's making or what future surprise appearances it might be setting up, you're engaging with the buzz and machine-like news cycle side of the product more than with the art itself, and you're defeating the entire purpose. I didn't like The Last Jedi, by the way, but Broom Boy Tamiri Blag here being a symbol rather than some sort of foreshadowing was so obvious it hurt, even back then. Right, so, good stuff in the Batman. This kid, good stuff. I talked a bunch earlier about how this or that person was the best actor, or second best or third best actor, featured in this movie, but that in this movie their performance wasn't necessarily the best. If, after all these microscope-level criticisms, you've been wondering who I think gave the best performance in the Batman...
Do I know it for a fact? I'm just saying it sure looked that way to me.
Until this movie, I don't think I'd ever seen John Turturro in anything before, and I definitely never heard of him. I'm curious about his other work now, because he's masterful as mob boss Carmine Falcone, somehow feeling simultaneously like a character from a wholly different movie and yet perfectly at home in the film noir world of the Batman. Turturro seems to have impeccable acting instincts, reining in his impulse is the perfect amount, and Falcone's dialogue is worlds apart from the rest of the cast in terms of quality, as if someone else wrote it. Compared to other characters, he's grounded and realistic, shedding all traces of goofy caricature without sacrificing an ounce of menace. If anything, he's more intimidating for how understated and relaxed he is. His faux-friendly exterior itself a threat because of how little effort he cares to put into making it convincing. He doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. He's untouchable and he knows it. Other characters know he could have them killed, that he would if he deemed it necessary, and he knows they know, and he knows it's obvious to everyone else that he knows they know, and he's fine with all of it. There's an unspoken understanding between him and everyone around him and a resulting unhurried, unsettling ease to his speech, his every movement. You get the sense that guys twice his size experience more stress twisting the caps off bottles than he does bumping off someone he's decided is an inconvenience. No disrespect to Tom Wilkinson in Batman Begins, but Turturro's Falcone is so much better than the 2005 incarnation of the character it's not even funny.
Yeah.
I said Colin Farrell was fantastic as the Penguin earlier, and I meant it, but almost immediately after that I dove into tearing apart Paul Dano's freakout scene, so people might have forgotten and I want to reiterate.
Wow, is that right?
Despite what I said a year ago, now when I watch the movie I'm happy every time Oz shows up on screen, even during this scene.
What the hell is this? Good cop, batshit cop? Oh, you guys are a hell of a duet here. Why'd you start harmonizing?
The dialogue is so bad. Seriously, he's a joy to watch.
This guy's crazy!
This isn't a backhanded compliment, I'm being sincere. It's like how you know you should try to eat healthy, but sometimes you just want junk, you know? Sometimes you just quieres Taco Bell.
Like the worst Spanish I ever heard.
Shh. Please stop talking now. Okay, what else? This Good Time reference is really cool. Good Time is a fantastic movie also starring Robert Pattinson that I briefly covered on the channel last year, and it was after watching it that Matt Reeves decided to reach out to Pattinson about playing Batman. Looks like Connie Nikas became a drophead.
I am better than you.
Guess not. The movie definitely is though, go watch it if you haven't. I like Selina Kyle's story pretty much from start to finish. In particular, I thought this scene was great even back when I didn't like the movie, but her entire character is handled really well. She's fun but not ridiculous, jaded without being cold.
I have a thing about strays.
Likable and sympathetic but flawed, and shown to be driven and capable, playing to realistic strengths that don't make your eyes roll back in your head. We've got enough of that already with Batman. She's perfectly balanced. Oh, and I actually don't mind the infamous white privileged assholes line.
All anyone cares about in this place are these white privileged assholes.
Don't get me wrong, the entire concept of white privilege is broad stroke scapegoating horseshit, but it makes sense that someone who buys into that would blindly express support for a socially inept, dangerous, murdering extremist on the internet telling everyone why people they don't know deserve to die.
The mayor, the commissioner, the DA. Now Thomas and Bruce Wayne, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that psycho's right to go after these creeps. I think you'd be on his side.
Bitch, are you for real?
In that moment, Selina Kyle is literally agreeing with a domestic terrorist and trying to get Batman to join his cause. She's supposed to be wrong there. That's actually one of my favorite things about Selina Kyle. So often in media, we get male protagonists who start off doing life wrong, but change thanks in part to the guidance of morally superior female characters, who, as it turns out, had the answers all along. Tropes like this diminish both male and female characters and hurt art as a whole. Always some exasperated woman waiting for the guy to get his act together. Some young girl who only needs to learn that she has nothing to learn, that she isn't in any way lacking, that she's already good enough and always has been. I can't be the only one who feels insulted on behalf of women by this, can I?
So stick to your post and follow my orders.
Are people not bored by this? Surely there are countless other legitimate lessons women sometimes need to learn in life. That's the human condition. It's always nice when female superhero characters are allowed into the realm of semi-sophisticated storytelling. It's refreshing when they're allowed real agency, afforded the opportunity to screw up without the writers making it all okay, and then grow from it in a meaningful way. And that's why Bruce being Selina's moral anchor is such a pleasant reversal, so important not only to his character, that's who Batman is, but to hers as well. I do wish the story explicitly addressed the fact that Selina cluelessly believed misinformation about the Waynes and justified the Riddlers targeting Bruce based on nothing but a propaganda video, but I'm also aware that the movie is already really long. All that aside, this take on Selina Kyle is effective and compelling, and her character arc has really stuck with me over the past year. I love the music a lot. The only negative thing I really have to say about the score at this point is that the use of the beautiful Ave Maria makes it feel like the film is trying awkwardly to punch above its intellectual weight. For a while, when you'd go to almost any upload of the song on YouTube, you'd find a steaming heap of fresh comments from teenagers quoting the Riddler. And at the time, it was distressing to think that so many people learned about Schubert's masterpiece thanks to a movie that frankly doesn't deserve to use it. I think I first heard it in One Piece, as one should. But the music being far better than the work its scoring deserves is the norm, not a unique case here, so I can't ding the Batman too hard for that, and the original music fits right in, and it's lovely. I've even warmed up to the extremely repetitive part of the main theme, the part my friend Bobby came up with lyrics for.
I am Batman, I am Batman,
Michael Giacchino has really crafted something special here. The track Gonica Girl and especially Catwoman's theme might be the standouts for me. They're just so beautiful, elevating the already appealing rainy, misty film noir atmosphere to a more perfect, transcendent version of itself. For all the problems I have with the movie, the final scene of Bruce and Selina leaving the graveyard, riding up and out of the past together, side by side for the last stretch before going their separate ways, Selina to a new life free of the Iceberg Lounge, its patrons, and Falcone's shadow, Bruce to wherever he's needed, to his life of duty to Gotham and to his parents' legacy that he now tackles with newfound purpose. This scene makes me feel something, and Giacchino's wonderful score has a lot to do with that. I still don't love the Batman, but I sort of get now why so many people do. I initially went into it expecting something different than what it was aiming to be, and now that I understand that, I have a newfound appreciation for it. I'd like to revise the statement that serves as the title of my original review and say that I now like the Batman at all. I think it's one of the better live-action Batman movies, and there are things it does better than any of the others. So yeah, this might be the most neck injury inducing up and down I've ever felt about a piece of media. I appreciate you sticking with me through to the end. If you're new to my channel and want something else to watch, I've got a playlist of videos like these covering several really great movies, and I think you'd enjoy binging them. I'm especially proud of these two. I think my Minority Report video is possibly the strongest analysis of that particular movie on YouTube. I realize that makes me sound like my head's up my ass, but what can I say? Sometimes you just know you've done a good job. I also have a long ongoing series honoring my late brother Jameson, who passed away almost 5 years ago. Now I know that's not going to be most people's cup of tea, but I wanted to mention it just in case. Getting Jameson's name and story out there is one of my main missions with this channel. If by chance you're dealing with loss and grief and think it might be worth your while to watch a total stranger meditate on and work through his own loss and grief in various unorthodox ways, don't feel weird about checking some of those out. You can skip past the gameplay if Kingdom Hearts isn't your thing and go straight to the vlog portion of each episode. Lastly, as a community-minded guy, there are several specific people I want to thank. First, my friend Troy. He loved the Batman from the start and so naturally didn't enjoy my review last year, but he still supported me by watching both it and the video I did on the deleted Joker scene. He thoughtfully shared his perspective with me and pointed me in the direction of some of the Batman comics he likes, which was a big help, and he's just generally been really encouraging. Thank you, Troy. David Schwartz is an incredible artist I started talking to in a Discord server several months ago. He's got a lot of interesting insight on a wide range of topics pertaining to art and storytelling, and the process of reading through the comics was made more fun and rewarding by chatting with him afterwards and hearing his detailed praises and criticisms of each. He's also fantastically talented at drawing. Sharing his art was my idea, not his. I firmly believe that it should be seen. Go follow him on Instagram and tell him which of his pieces are your favorites. Likewise, I believe that the music of Sam Winters should be heard. There's a reason his name's in my end screen, and again, it's not because he asked me to put it there. If you've watched up to this point in the video, you've already heard a track or two by Sam, and you can hear more on Spotify and Bandcamp. Links are in the description. Sam's new album Nightscape Expansion Original Soundtrack is a stellar love letter to RPGs and anime from the late 90s, stuff like Xenogears and Outlaw Star. It's seriously phenomenal. Fucking listen to this. Dissolve into it. This isn't the last time you'll be hearing me mention Sam Winters on this channel. So you may have noticed that my little guy here is up and running around now. The mad scientist responsible for this is Mubin Khan, a 3D animator for hire. Believe it or not, this sort of thing isn't what Mubin usually makes, and a less adventurous artist might not have wanted to touch the project, but when I gave Mubin the details, he nodded thoughtfully, clapped his hands together, and gave me a fiercely confident look with eyes that screamed, "Let's stick some arms on this baby." He and I worked closely together for several months trying to get every detail just right. I was a fair and patient but very demanding customer, and Mubin likewise was patient with my endless requests for tiny revisions, rising to the challenge again and again. I want to thank Mubin for helping me bring this little freak to life, and I heartily recommend his services to anyone out there looking to add a little something to their creative endeavors on or off YouTube. Not many of us will find the time to learn 3D animation alongside honing our various other crafts, but that's why God gave us Mubin Khan. He and I also both got married while working on this project together. That's pretty cool. Cheek the artist did a fantastic job on the thumbnail for this video, as well as on my new channel banner a little while before that. Twitter links in the description. You know what to do. Last and actually most, I want to thank my wife. Not for anything pertaining to the actual making of the video. She lost what little interest she had in the Batman maybe an hour in and has nothing to really say about it, but for being generally helpful, reliable, and supportive through one of the most transitional periods of my life. Things could very easily have gone a lot less smoothly than they have, but gee, he is awesome. Alright, that's enough. This video took way too long to make. You know I still haven't played Resident Evil 4 Remake? I haven't had time. I'm gonna go do that. Until next time, Baby Arms Army, at ease.
I am Batman. 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 I am Batman.